Hello. And it's so good to be here on this Saturday talking about science fiction and all that good stuff. Just to introduce, my name is Donna Jackson. I am the developer of Color of Sci-Fi, which is a project that celebrates science fiction and people of color who have created it, who have been characters in it, and also to give us a chance to talk about representation in science fiction and the importance of it. Uh, Today, I've been excited about this for over a month to talk to our guest, Mr. Derek Tyler Attico. But before I get into that, I just want to make sure we all know about him and his background. So I'm going to read his bio. Give me 1 second. Here we go. Mr. Derek Tyler Attico is a science fiction author, essayist, and photographer. He won the Excellence in Playwriting Award from the Dramatists Guild of America. He is a two-time winner of the Star Trek Strange New Worlds short story contest, and those two stories were Alpha and Omega and The Dreamer and the Dream, and published by Simon & Schuster. And Derek is also the author of the Star Trek novel, The Autobiography of Benjamin Sisko, which is the reason we're here, and it's published by Titan Publishing. His short stories appear in Turning the Tide from the International Association of Media Tie-in Writers, the NASA Exoplanet Science Institute at Caltech, Thrilling Adventure Yarns from Crazy 8 Press, and others. His essays appear in print from Star Trek Magazine and ATB Publishing. Derek is also a contributing writer for the Star Trek Adventures tabletop role-playing game and role-playing game designer. With a degree in English and history, Derek is an advocate of the arts, human rights, and inclusion. And if you like, after this, if you're not already following Mr. Attico, you can find him on derekattico.com, which is his website, or on social media platforms under the handle @DAttico. So it is a pleasure to have you here today, Mr. Attico. Derek, how are you?
Donna, thank you for that incredible introduction. Wow, thank you. I've never heard my own biography read out loud. Wow, it's crazy. Thank you.
You've done a lot.
I've done a lot, right? Thank you. Thank you to the Detroit Public Library for having me. Thank you for having me and for bringing this about. I really appreciate that so much. I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to discuss science fiction, the autobiography of Benjamin Sisko, Afrofuturism. I'm ready to discuss it all with everyone.
Got it. Well, let's dive in then. So first and foremost, let's just we talked a little bit already through your bio of your career, but specifically what got you into science fiction writing?
I think I really would credit my parents, specifically my mom, for that. Mothers are awesome. We all know this, right?
Yes.
Mothers are awesome. I was a little kid, 10 years old, and she took me to see Star Wars. My parents were a little nuts because they would take me to see films that are all films and the films that interest them. And so I remember we went like to the midnight showing of Star Wars, and I was blown away. And when we all came back home, it was like, I don't know, maybe 2, 3 in the morning, and she had like these comics of Star Wars ready and waiting for me. And so like the next morning I woke up and read them, and I was really interested after that in writing. I wanted to know how that was done, how what it took to become a writer. So for me, Star Wars was a spark that started me on the path of writing, and I started to learn everything I could about writing, and reading everything I could about how to write, screenwriting, short fiction, long form novelization, everything I could. So by the time I was 16, I won my first award, and not a lot of schooling in regards to fiction writing, just a lot of me reading, absorbing, and just doing it over and over. And by the time I wanted to do it as a career, but I didn't have a lot of money to go to school. I was accepted by NYU School of the Arts, but I
Wow.
couldn't afford to go. So, now that story
Understandably.
goes, right? That story goes.
I
Um,
do.
so I went to other pursuits, but writing wouldn't let go of me. So I've always come back around to being a writer.
I love that you talked about mom bringing you into science fiction. That was the same for me too. It was my mom that brought me to that, you know. So yeah, hands up for mothers. They
Hmm.
do this for us, and it got sparked from there. So now that you had the spark, and you said by 16 you got your first award in writing. What took you? How did you get into the Star Trek world? Because this, even though we're so ready for the book, this isn't your first rodeo in Star Trek.
Right, right, right. Well, again with my mom, we would watch Star Trek all the time. From the original series, we go see all the movies and all that, and I would go with my mom, and as a kid, and it was funny because my friends would come along and with my mom, and when we were not of age, so she would be the adult taking all of us, but all of us would talk about it because we were all knowledgeable. Um, uh, Fast forward around 2005, a friend of mine, he said, there's this contest, a Star Trek anthology writing contest. And at that time, I wasn't writing at all. I knew I had an ability, but I hadn't really used it. And I really wasn't looking I wasn't really thinking of myself as a professional writer. Um, but this contest was so exciting. It was called the Star Trek Strange New Worlds Anthology Contest. And it was at that time, it had started in 1997. And what happened was fans could just submit stories, and the editors would pick the best stories, about 10 or 12 of those best stories to publish every year. And so I wrote a Star Trek story, Alpha and Omega, and it was submitted into the 2005 Star Trek Strange New Worlds 8, and it also took first place. And I was like, oh wow, I guess I still have something, and I
Right?
guess maybe I should try and be a professional writer after that. And that's what set me on this course. So Star Trek is very close to me because it was my first professional gig.
Wow.
Yeah,
I mean, it's more than just science fiction. Like, this is what made you, at least in the career space, is Star
absolutely,
Trek. Wow.
absolutely.
So let's do a deeper dive, because this is what people want to know. Like, okay, you got this autobiography. What made you say yes to it outside of the obvious? Like, what made you say yes to this project?
Well, going along that same line, the autobiography of Benjamin Sisko. This is also my first novel, which is
Wow.
crazy. So a lot of firsts for me when it comes to Star Trek, and I'm very
Wow.
thankful. Make no
Kudos.
mistake, I'm
Kudos.
very thankful to Star Trek for that. So it's also my first novel. So in 2016, there was a Strange New Worlds short story contest was brought back for the 50th anniversary of Star Trek. I submitted a story, Deep Space Nine story called "The Dream in a Dream."
Mm.
That got in, and I was really happy that got in. It was a Deep Space Nine Benny Russell story, which is a continuation from the episode of Deep Space Nine Far Beyond the Stars,
Yes,
which is a really powerful episode.
I'm assuming if anyone's here a Deep Space Nine or a Star Trek fan, that's one of the episodes that you would know. And even that saying, "the dreamer in the dream," is something that stuck with most of us probably. But yes, go ahead and tell us about
Indeed,
the dream.
indeed. So yeah, so then that story did really well, and that really helped to really cement my career. And I just started writing really a lot after 2016. So fast forward to about a year or two ago, and someone was doing a podcast, and they were talking about the anthology, I'm sorry, the autobiography series that Titan is doing, the wonderful autobiography series with the captains. They've done Captain Kirk, they've done Mr. Spock, they've done Captain Picard and Captain Janeway. So someone commented that in the lineage Captain Sisko, Benjamin Sisko, was skipped, and they went and did Janeway. When are they going to do Ben Sisko? And that if they do a Sisko autobiography, that this guy named Attico, he wrote a really great DS9 story in 2016. He should be the person to do the autobiography. So Titan found out about that, read the short story I wrote in 2016. They liked it, and then they contacted me. So this is a long way around, but this is how it happened, and this is how things happen. So thankfully for Twitter and the internet,
Right.
I'm really thankful. And that's how that started. They said they liked the story, and then we had a conversation about which way to go, and they liked my ideas for the autobiography, and we were off to the races.
Well, I mean, if you didn't write the stories prior, this wouldn't have happened though. So I mean, you in some way were always progressing to this point. So if
Right.
any youngsters out there listening to this, write because you love it, continue to write, and you never know who will read it or where that story will take you. So
Yes, yes,
I
indeed.
I wanted to ask, so um, you said we know why you said yes to the project. So what was the process once you said yes and you're on it? How long did it take you to actually do the writing of the story? And what was your process of getting to know this character so deeply that, I mean, autobiography, that's not biography, autobiography. So you had to
Right.
really get to know this person deeply. So what was that process like?
Well, luckily, I had some history writing Ben Sisko from the 2016 story, so that was great.
Right.
But it's a process. It's make no mistake, it's a process. Uh, First, you have to write an outline, and you have to understand it's not just you're not just an author and you just come up with ideas and you're like go ahead. Because this is a business and a franchise that's over 57 years. Um, what happens is you have to write an outline. That outline has to be approved. Then you write the manuscript, and that has to be approved. So there are different levels and different stages that you have to go in the process. And it's understandable because I'm writing what I want to write, but I'm also writing for intellectual property and for Star Trek, and it has to reflect that. It has to be something that everyone at Paramount and CBS agrees with, and it all has to gel. So the first thing I did was I took some time to just think about what I wanted in the outline. Took about maybe a week to think about what I wanted in the outline and try to think seriously about that, because the outline is written and approved, I'm locked in. As a writer, once that's approved, I can't come up with something crazy and off the wall,
All right.
because people would be like, wait a minute, that's not what's in the outline. That's not what you said. So I
Right.
really thought hard about what would be the origin story of Benjamin Sisko, the things that I would like to say, but not just things that I would like to say, things that I think people would relate to, you know? Uh, the thing about the beauty of, I think, of science fiction, which even delves into Afrofuturism, is that we're talking about us as a species, us as people, us as individuals, not only now, but in the future. So a lot of the same issues and problems we have now, we have or may have in the future, but who we are shouldn't change. Those principles, those ideals, those hopes, you know, those are the key things that we need to be able to identify within ourselves today and tomorrow. So these are all the things that I had to think about, what I wanted to say and how I wanted to put them. Put that in the outline, and that was approved. And then it was off to the races, and then it was writing in Benjamin Sisko's voice, which is not easy because that's Mr. Brooks,
Correct.
and he's not he's a profound actor. So becoming familiar again with his voice and figuring out how I wanted to take his voice and what he wanted to say, and his voice from the television show that we know is not necessarily the Benjamin Sisko that you're going to start out with, because how does a person get there?
Yeah, you have to
right? Like
progress to that,
you
correct?
have to progress. I don't sound the way I sound now is not how I sounded at 10, or not
Correct.
even the same ideals. Or I mean,
Right,
we're human beings and we grow. Things happen to us, and who we're around and the events shape us.
right.
And that is what I wanted to present in the autobiography and to the reader, events that would shape individuals, so that when you read it, you can say, oh, I see who and how he became who he is through those events, not
Right.
just showing you who he was already made, if that makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, none of us, I mean, it would be great if Benjamin Sisko came out as cool as he was at 1 and then at 41, like, oh no,
Great.
that's a growth process. And to be able to see that, that's the job or the work that you did to allow us to see that. And we might even see more of ourselves in Benjamin Sisko through this book, as
Great.
teens, as kids, as all of that. I mean, you kind of talked a little bit about getting his voice. What was the magic around that? Like, what did you do? What were a couple of things you did to try to get his voice? I mean, I'm assuming you watched Deep Space Nine, but were there other things that you did to capture his voice and mannerisms in on the page?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, Avery Brooks is a very powerful actor, very unique actor. I
Agree.
quickly realized oh yeah, and I quickly realized, Donna, that I couldn't use anything he had done before to capture his voice, because what he's doing, what Mr. Brooks is doing for Sisko, he's not doing in A Man Called Hawk, or he's not doing in any other iteration that he's shown us before.
Okay.
He's just doing it for Sisko. I was like, so I can't go to anything when he was younger or this or that. I can't do that. Because he's just so good. So I just went to certain episodes, and I like In the Pale Moonlight is an episode I think Deep Space Nine fans will know. And it's very much like a play, is the way it's written. And it's basically like a 40-minute monologue of
Right.
him talking to the audience, which was great for me, because then I could get his voice and I could just listen and listen and listen. And after doing that a few times, I just, if I'm be really honest, I just stopped watching him, and I stopped watching all of Deep Space Nine, because after a certain point, you don't want to overdo it.
I get that.
You just want to get it. You want to get what you want, and then you just want to let go of it. And so I did that, and I was maybe a couple months into the writing, and I needed to watch an episode for some reason. I don't remember now. And I was watching an episode, and he was giving some speech. And I was like, wait a minute, that sounds just like what I wrote. And I was like, oh wow, that's great, because I knew then that I was definitely had my finger on the right pulse.
You captured the spirit, you did it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, he's a Mr. Avery Brooks is a magnificent actor,
Phenomenal.
and I do think, I mean, there's several of those episodes that just magnificent work, but that definitely the Pale Moonlight is one where you really get to do this deep dive where, I mean, you see this human being, and it's just
Mm-hmm.
magnificent to capture that. I can't wait to read now. I mean, so I mean, I this was the 90s when this was out, and I was I'm not gonna tell my age. I was younger. Okay. So but a couple of things about watching this show is to first, this was the first Black captain that we saw in Star Trek, and to and for me watching it, I didn't see like a Black captain. I just saw a captain that happened to be Black. It wasn't played in this, his Blackness was not invisible at all, but it wasn't like the thing. And that made it kind of big for me. Like, you can be Black, you can be human, you can be a leader, you can be all of these things at the same time. Do you, and I feel like that's was an important part of this show for me watching it. So do you feel like in your writing that was captured, like these dualities, not even duality, multi of parts of who we are? What is that captured in the novel? And it was it important to capture the Blackness in the novel? Like I don't know. It's a
No, Donna, you're exactly right. Everything you're
I'm
saying is
like, I'm
exactly
glad I
right.
didn't have to write it.
I quickly realized that there were certain uh there were certain, I don't want to call them hurdles, perhaps tenets or markers that this particular novel had to achieve. There were certain things that this novel had to achieve that may not have been in other autobiographies, because this is the first autobiography of a captain of color. And you're right, in the 23rd century, in the 24th century, color is not a thing anymore for the vast majority of us on earth. It's not supposed to be a thing anymore.
Right.
We've gotten past that ignorance. We've gotten past racism,
Right.
right? In the 20th century and 21st century, it's a thing. So
Yeah,
it's a thing. So, the trick and the challenge is to write that and to pay attention to that. But, as a writer, I am definitely going to infuse it with all of the embodiment and spirit and soul of Star Trek, because that's one of the points that Gene Roddenberry, in his creation of that, is why he created this multicultural, multicolored family. So if I'm so blessed as to have Gene Roddenberry and Star Trek writers pass that baton to me, right, then I have to take that baton and honor it and pass it forward. So that's in my head. At the same time, I want someone that's not a person of color to come to this and be like, I don't know anything about the Black experience. I want to be able to read this and just enjoy it on that level because I like Star Trek.
Right.
And just read Star. And I think there's nothing wrong with that. I think there's nothing wrong with that. And so that has to be there. Then you want a person of color to say, I like Star Trek too, but I would like to know, is there anything in the Black experience in this book? Because I am a person of color, and because the character, Benjamin Sisko, was definitely a person of color and definitely thought a lot about the Black experience. And I think a lot of that, to answer your question, is because Mr. Avery Brooks, even in the 90s, was thinking forward and was thinking about the future and was doing things like putting African art and wearing African clothing. And so he was projecting Afrofuturism within the Star Trek universe. So that has to be in it as well.
Right.
Right? So all of this has to be in it. And at the same time, at no point should you feel like the author is hitting you over the head with any of this. It should just feel like, oh, this is just a part of this universe. This is just what's happening. These are just how these things unfolded.
Right.
And I hope I achieved that. So far, people from advanced readers have told me that that's been done. So it's up to the readers to decide. But I think they'll enjoy the way I handle that.
You brought up Afrofuturism a couple of times, and do you see your novel being seen as part of that Afrofuturistic movement, and how do you see it becoming a part of that? I know we didn't talk about this, but it just kind of dawned on me like, wow, this might be, these are connected. So can you talk about Afrofuturism and how or if you see your novel connected to that?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I one thing I started realizing really quickly was I've always believed in and understood what Afrofuturism is. It's people of color taking the ideals and embodiment of who we are and projecting that into the future, right? And that's saying that we exist in the future and that we prosper and that we have a future. And that's not always seen in a lot of European and Western entertainment. It's just not a lot of times. it's more now, thankfully.
Yes.
But what I started to realize in writing this specifically is that Afrofuturism, regardless, at least this is just my personal opinion, Afrofuturism, regardless of the property, is a conversation. So what I mean by that is that if I feel what was done in the Black Panther films,
Okay.
with Ryan Coogler, and what Star Trek does, and what this autobiography does, is just a continuation of the conversation. Yes, those properties are not linked. Yes, they have nothing to do with each other, but the conversation is connected. The idea is connected. The individuals trying to move and push that future forward is connected. And so I really felt that. I felt that as I watched Black Panther, or as I listened to the soundtrack as I wrote, I would like, oh yeah, this is what I'm doing, is I'm just moving I'm just really talking about a future where not just people of color, but where we all exist, and people of color have that future that we want and deserve, you know, equity, right? So,
Yeah.
and so for me, it became just a conversation which goes through everything. And that made it much easier to think about, and much easier to, so it wasn't necessarily like I felt like I had to put it in, but as I was writing, I think it just became a natural byproduct of what I was doing, if that makes sense.
No, that really goes into the next question for me. When you're talking about it, it kind of just kind of became. Do you? I want to make sure I pose this right. When you were writing this, were there other surprises or things that just kind of came out that might have been aha for you? I don't know if you could speak on it, but
No,
when
that's
you were
yeah.
writing, were there things like you said you got this kind of aha about Afrofuturism, like you're continuing the conversation. Was there anything else about Benjamin Sisko or even about the process that was like a aha for you?
There's definitely a few things specifically towards Afrofuturism, and definitely just in Benjamin Sisko's life, that I think readers would be like, oh wow, that's interesting, that's cool. um uh Without giving anything away, I will say absolutely that there are things that I realized that I had an opportunity to do with this autobiography, and push forward, not just for the autobiography of Benjamin Sisko, but for Star Trek and the Star Trek universe, because I thought a lot about Gene Roddenberry as I wrote this, and he had passed away before Deep Space Nine as a series began, um, and there are people that say, oh, well, he may not have wanted that series or enjoyed that series because it wasn't on the ship and it wasn't on the station. But I really believe and that those writers, Ira Stephen Bear, um, 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 Mike Pillar, all those guys, they really
Well,
were respectful
yeah.
of Gene Roddenberry's work, um, and and they didn't deviate. They embodied the spirit of what he wanted. And so what I thought a lot about is Gene Roddenberry always says that we are united as a people in the future. So part of what I did was think about, well, how did we get there?
Mm.
Right? Because when we start watching Captain Kirk, it's already happened, right? We're all united. We're all in the ship Enterprise. There's that whole, united family of different colors, and but how did
Right?
we get? How did that process start? And we know that in the storyline of Star Trek, we know there was like a World War III, and things went really bad before they got better. So I just started to think about, well, what would have to happen? How would people um, come together? And so some of that is touched on in a big way in the book, because if you're going to start to talk about a family of color, I think that's a question that some people would have in the back of their mind. Like, well, how did that happen? How did we get there? you know?
Big question. I would
Right,
love to know that, as
right.
because it's in a lot of us, if we would say it or not, we dream of that experience. Like, what is the thing that would switch us from seeing skin color or culture or ethnicity as a divider and see it as a part of humanity? What caused that? Yeah, I want to see that. I also want to see how they got rid of money. So maybe.
Right, right, right. So those are some of the things that I touched on because I was like, this is a perfect opportunity, and I'm always also thinking about pushing Star Trek forward and helping to fill out that universe because it's such a really textured and layered universe, and you want to try and add to that universe in ways that make it feel it already feels real, I think, to everyone,
Oh,
but
yeah.
try and give it a little bit more texture in certain places.
And I'll say this before I ask the next question, like, you filling the universe then gives us something to aspire to even more so. You're filling those gaps. Like, is that how that happened? We can aspire to that. So
Right.
yes, answering those questions, I would love to know how you got there. Um, um, what do you hope as readers read about Captain Sisko uh, that they may take away or learn from the reading this book about Captain Sisko or about the book itself?
That's a really great question, Donna. I thought a lot about that even before writing the book, and when I thought about the outline, I thought a lot about what people would take away from this. Without giving anything away, I can say that there's a lot in the book that Ben talks about that are things that people could come away from, come away with, come away with, and that they will hopefully things that he says that they can think about what he's saying and why he's saying those things and say like, oh wow, maybe those things relate to them in their life. You know, oh, I can't. I want to say more, but I can't. But there's a right. Well, we know Ben has always been this man that is about family.
Yes.
Um, uh, Specifically with his son, with Jake, and even the family of his crew on the station. And that thread is definitely continued in the autobiography. You
Awesome.
know, um, and in talking about his life, and in me as the author writing his life, I want to make sure there were things that people could identify with, um, and so that they could see that how he learned certain lessons, and maybe they could take those lessons and apply them, or at least even if not even apply them, but just look at them and say, "Oh, okay, I see what those lessons are saying. I see what he's saying about the world, or I see what he's saying about morality, or I see what he's saying about character." Because I think these are things that need to be said, and I think if anyone is going to say them, now we would need to hear them from Benjamin Sisko.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it it's so you try not to have bias. Well, I try not to have bias about it. I got because I watched them all. I As you started with your mom watching, I started with my mom watching the original series. And I definitely, I'm a Picard fan. I mean, to have
Right.
a Brit come and like very much own that space up,
Mm-hmm.
right? But this one, this person, meaning Captain Sisko, felt real to me. Like, not saying that the others didn't, but it didn't feel like someone was acting. It just felt like someone was being.
Mm-hmm.
So it made everything else around him feel more real. So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
to then take that and now you're putting it in a form where you can really absorb it slower, and over again in this other way. As you can see, I'm an avid reader, so to be able to do it in that way, I think you are one progressing us in the Star Trek story, but you're also in that human story of
Right.
Star Trek, which went away from just entertaining, which you want to get entertained, I'm not saying, but also in this, like, again, aspiring us to be better and do better. And I
Right.
think the only person that could at least initially do that has to be a Black man. I mean, I can't, I mean, I couldn't see it, especially at that time in the 90s, what was all happening, to see him in that space. And now you're writing about it, telling us how he got to that space. I think it's just something marvelous about that. And I want to make sure people know the date that it drops here in the States. You said, can you let people know that date?
Yes, it drops Tuesday, November 21st, and that is worldwide. So
Okay,
not just in the States, internationally. It
got it.
drops November 21st, worldwide, and they can pre-order now. So if you pre-order now, that means that on that date, it should arrive at your home. That's the way, as I understand it, it should get there on the 21st, or like right after the 21st, but I think it should arrive like on the 21st at your home if you pre-order now.
So this is
Um,
Thanksgiving reading, basically. That's
this
so
is Thanksgiving reading. It's just 2 days in the States. It's right. It's 2 days. Two
it's a
days before Thanksgiving, which is really
yeah,
great. Which is really great. I
yeah.
couldn't. I did not know that was not planned. So I'm very thankful for that. Talking about thanks, and to kind of add to what you're saying, I think Benjamin Sisko is the most balanced of all the other captains. Not to take away anything from the other captains, because
No, not at all.
they're all great
Yes,
individuals. Um, but I will say they all have something lacking, right? I mean, uh, Kirk is great captain, but he didn't have a really, his family was, he couldn't have relationships. Picard
yeah,
didn't like kids, and all that. Even Michael Burnham, she's still grappling with stuff.
right.
Pike seems to be coming up, as in my opinion, as number two to Sisko, where he's starting to have some balance to him. But by far, Benjamin Sisko is the most balanced because he has a child. He has he was married and he's widowed. He's married again, and he has made that life work balance work for him. He understands how it works.
Right,
And
I agree.
and not yeah, and not a lot of captains do that. They don't understand how to do that. For whatever reason, they don't understand how to do that. Great people, but just can't get that balance right. And I think because he gets that balance right, it's someone that we all identify with. And we're like, oh, I like that guy. I like that he's got that thing. And so what part of what's really hard is to take a character that already has balance and then show how that happened.
So you felt that was difficult like capture that?
Because it's someone that has something missing. It's always easy to plug that in, be like, okay, well, it's missing because of this type of trauma or that type of trauma. But when someone is pretty much fully formed, when we see them, it's like, well, wow, how did they get there? How did they get to this place of being fully formed? It wouldn't be realistic to say they didn't have trauma in their life, because then that becomes a caricature, right?
Right.
So they had to have trauma, but how did they overcome those traumas? What was their foundational upbringing that allowed them to become this fully formed adult? And that, I think, was a little bit challenging for me to think about, and then to write it and make it believable for everyone.
Well, I look forward to seeing how you resolve that, and I do think one thing, us seeing the trauma, we actually got to see his trauma compared to, and I think that's probably why Pike also probably speaks to us in that same way, because
Mm-hmm.
we know the trauma and that
That's
he's living with every single day.
Right.
I don't know. I don't know how,
I
yeah.
don't know how I could do that because he knows it's coming.
He knows it's coming.
And he has to deal with that. That takes a
Yeah.
heck of a strong character
Right.
to
So I
do
think
that.
that's part of it. Right before we started film, recording this, we were talking about Stoicism and even Eastern thoughts about how you deal with life, either this kind of positive thinking or thinking of the worst thing ever and knowing if you can do, if you can deal with that, then you can deal with everything. I kind of think just hearing you talk and just watching Deep Space Nine and even reading some other novels that I feel like Benjamin Sisko gets both of those things. Like
Yes.
and the worst of the worst, like it can't get any worse than this. I saw my wife die doing this, or
Right.
the best of the best and thinking positive to get out of things or to get through things. I think that's another reason people enjoy this character too.
Yeah.
I'm gonna ask you, do you think that with your book and a lot of the new things that are happening in Star Trek that there might be some push, some desire for Mr. Avery Brooks to come back and do something to kind of to bring that character back to us in this other way? Do you think your book might have something in that might say that's worth me coming and speaking or doing or expressing about this character that I developed?
Well, wow, that's a
That's
great
everyone's
question.
there's not too many people, I'm pretty sure, that's not thinking the same thing on some level. But what
Absolutely. No, you're absolutely right. The most asked question I get is Mr. Brooks going to do the audio book?
oh my gosh, that would be
Right?
awesome. Oh my gosh.
And I tell everybody the same thing. I said, I have no idea because that's way above my security clearance. I don't know. I'm not privy to those conversations. I don't know. I don't know. I would presume anything in that regards, it would be whether he would or would not want to do that.
Right. It's his choice, but
It's his
that would
choice,
be amazing.
that would be amazing. I would say in regards to what I wrote, I could say there are things set up in the book. Uh and you just have to take that for what it is. I can't say
I get it. I get it.
yeah, there are things set up and whether he would like to read, whether Sirach Lofton would like to read the audiobook would be wonderful. I'm always thinking about not only the project I'm given, but I'm always thinking about moving things forward. So, I mean, there's a lot in this book that anyone that wants to put in a Star Trek series could, if they wanted to.
That's
know,
brilliant.
so because why not, right? I mean, if
Right.
they wanted to, there's enough to grab on here and put definitely to move things forward for sure.
Yeah, even hearing Sirach Lofton, who played the son, would
Right,
be
Jake
great.
Sisko, yeah.
Yeah, that would be
Yeah.
great to hear his voice on the audio too. I want to make sure I give time for others to ask questions. So just a couple others from me. So now that this is going to be out there, I'm probably sure you're just going to kind of take it in, and see how people are enjoying it. But do you have what's next for you?
I'm working on a few things, nothing I can really talk about right now,
Okay.
unfortunately. But yeah, I'm working on a few things. I'm really excited to see what people think about this. As I said, it's my first novel. So that's crazy too. That it's my first
I
novel,
know, I didn't
right?
even put that together.
Yeah.
I mean, I reread all the things that you sent me and just doing my homework, but it didn't dawn on me that this was your first novel. So
Yeah.
definitely a congratulations on
Thank
that.
you.
And
Thank you.
just
Yeah.
how are you feeling about that's I guess that's one of your
Milestones, right? Yeah, for
right.
sure.
Check it
Yeah,
off
for
your
sure.
list. So how are
Yeah.
you feeling about that? And then yeah, how
I'm just
Yeah.
I'm just honored. I'm just honored because for my first novel to be a Star Trek novel is ridiculously blessed. I'm just really thankful that Titan Books, George Sanderson, the managing editor over there, Titan, and everyone over there, and CBS and everyone in Star Trek put their faith in me to deliver this. That's a big deal, and I want to deliver for them, to be quite honest. That being said, it's great. I mean, it's great. I'm not saying it's not, it's great. And I've learned a lot. But I had a lot of time before that, a lot of short stories I've written. I understand a story. So this was an organic and natural progression. It wasn't like I was struggling. It was a natural progression for me. And I'm very thankful that the first book was a Star Trek book.
Like I said, well, I'm very happy for you. I'm happy first novel. Definitely happy that they even chose you to write this novel. So we look forward. I know I look forward to reading it. With that, again, if you can give them the date that it's going to drop, and before you do that, letting people know if you have a public library in your town, you can always go to their website. Most public libraries have a form where you can request books to be purchased and placed into their collection. So that would be a great way of supporting Miss Attico and to support the story in this novel. So making sure you do that as well as buy it. You can buy it at home, and then you can also make sure someone else can have access to it while at the public library. So if you can give them the date again, Derek.
Tuesday, November 21st. It's a little under 3 weeks. It will be available worldwide everywhere. So everywhere books are sold. If you're the kind of person that likes to walk into a bookstore and get it, what I would suggest is maybe call your favorite bookstore and just say, "Hey, are you gonna have this book?" And if they say no, then ask them to just give them the ISBN number, and you can find that either from me on Twitter or Facebook, or you can just go to the Titan Books, or you can go anywhere, just type in the Autobiography of Benjamin Sisko, and you can get that information. And then, or you can just, what am I saying? You just, the bookstore will know. Just say, this is the name of the book, and they'll pull it up and have them order it for you. And so that they'll have it when you go in to pick it up. But anywhere books are sold, they should have it. If they don't, ask them to pick it up and carry it. And you can pre-order, which makes it really easy, I think, for people to get it on that day.
Absolutely.
November 21st, yeah.
November 21st. So we're going to see if take some questions from the chat. Our buddy and friend Cully Summers from the Detroit Public Library is going to read off any questions we have there. Mr. Cully?
Engineering to bridge. We
I
have
love that.
Okay, we have from an anonymous attendee. You mentioned the episodes In the Pale Moonlight and Far Beyond the Stars as inspirations for the book. Are there other DS9 episodes you were inspired by when writing the book?
Oh my God. Yes. So many. There are between 50 to 100 Easter eggs in this book. And they don't, yeah. And they don't just span Deep Space Nine, but they span all of Star Trek. So if you've watched Star Trek, you'll and watched Deep Space Nine, you'll recognize them. I've got stuff from the original series, Voyager, Discovery. I've got stuff from everything, Enterprise. I've got stuff from everything in this book. Lower Decks. I got everything.
Oh wow, even Lower Decks, which I just watched the finale for that.
Yeah. No, I've got everything in this. I've got Easter eggs from everything in this book.
So you all heard that between 50 to 100 Easter eggs for you all to kind of take in. That was a great question.
That was a great question too. Thank you.
Yeah. Any more, Cully?
Yes, we have another question from J.R. Poole. If I bought multiple copies, how can I get them signed? I'd like to do a giveaway.
Oh, Okay, that's a great question. I tell you what, JR Poole, contact me off of here and we'll work it out. We'll figure it out. Because if you want to do a giveaway, we'll work it out. We'll figure it out. And I would love to sign for people. That's not a problem.
Oh,
So
that's so
contact me off of here. Yeah, like on Facebook, D Attico, Dattico, or Twitter, or X. Just reach out to me and we'll figure it out. There's probably a few different ways we could do that. And thank you for that question.
Appreciate you for doing that, and good question, J.R. Poole. Any additional questions, Cully, or if you have questions, because I know you like Star Trek too.
I just not really question. I want to let you know that Detroit Public Library has already pre-ordered our copies, and so we'll have them available for people to check out here. And we're super excited and proud to have Derek here. And yeah, just want to mention that.
Thank you, Cully. And I want to say, if a person has never watched Deep Space Nine or doesn't know a lot about Deep Space Nine, don't worry, because I've written a book so that you don't have to know every little detail. You don't have to know a lot of it at all. It's written in a way, and you would understand when you read the book, where you can come in with just a little cursory knowledge of Star Trek, and you'll be fine. And I did that because I realized a lot of people, we only watched it as kids,
yeah,
and then we forgot about it, Yeah. So it was written with that intent, so that you could go after reading it and go back if you want to, and it'll fill in those gaps for you. So don't worry about, oh, I need to know every little. Not at all. Not at all. You'll be fine. You'll be fine.
That's great to hear. A couple more questions, and then we can say we did a fabulous job and go on about business for the rest of the day. But is there anything in Star Trek that you particularly are loving right now, outside of the book that you just wrote and other things? Is it something specific that you just thoroughly are enjoying in Star Trek?
I'm enjoying this new wave of Star Trek. I personally believe that new wave is because of the fans, primarily, has kept Star Trek living and breathing for 57, 58 plus years. A lot of the authors of the novelizations have been continually writing Star Trek. When Star Trek is not on air, when there are no movies, they are keeping Star Trek in the minds and hearts of fans, so they deserve a kudos, and they deserve our appreciation. And I'm just loving seeing that. I'm just loving seeing the diversity, not just on the screen, but this is some of the first times that we've seen writing rooms of diversity.
Yes.
Discovery, I think it was Discovery that had the first writing rooms with people of color in the writing rooms.
Yeah.
And so I'm really happy to see that. I love Prodigy because it's targeted towards kids.
Yes, I love
and a lot, right? And a lot of people are like, oh, it's just for kids, but you need to watch it if you're not, because it's Star Trek. It's really good Star Trek. And so I'm just really happy that Star Trek is not overdoing itself, but it's targeting different genres and different areas, and it's really has like a resurgence in the new era of Star Trek. I'm really enjoying that, and I hope that this continues, because I think we need that in our lives to remind us, of the better part of ourselves. There's a lot of bad happening in the world, and we need to see that there can be a bright future where we all work together. That's just my opinion.
Especially, I mean, just in the last weeks, I concur that if we could just focus on the aspiration of, we can be this and do this together, and it can be because we already written it, or we've already created it or developed it in all of these different ways. So if we can think it, it can be, which goes back to our conversation about manifesting. We can manifest peace. We can manifest love the same way we can all of these other different things. So if there aren't any other questions, I was just going to thank Mr. Attico for this time, for actually fulfilling one of my milestones of being able to talk to someone that did a deep dive into one of my favorite characters. And I really am looking forward to reading this novel. And I don't know if you can see, like, those are
Yes.
right. That's what I mean, outside of all this, I do definitely read Star Trek novels. So that will be up here
That's awesome.
in a few weeks. So any other questions for Mr. Attico? If not, I thank you all. Right, get that book, 21st.
21st of November. 21st
I
November.
thank everyone for coming. I thank you for your time, and Derek, I thank you for this conversation.
Thank you.
And it's
Thank you
been
so
really,
much.
really fun. And everyone have a good Saturday, and enjoy some Star Trek. It's streaming everywhere.
It's streaming everywhere. Go watch some. Watch an episode.
Go watch some. Go watch Deep Space Nine.
Go watch Deep Space Nine. I know I will after this.
All right.
Thank you so much for having me, Donna. Thank you so much.
Have a good one. Everyone have a good one.